Hey guys, welcome back to my makeup tutorials. I will be going over today the concealer I use. So this is what I use. It's L'Oreal, super great, super moisturizing. I love to put it on in the morning. Yeah?
What are you doing?
It's my makeup tutorial.
We're not supposed to be doing that video today.
Is today not Tuesday?
No, it's Saturday.
Oh.
We're supposed to be doing that one about Matthew.
Oh. We're gonna talk about Matthew.
The book of Matthew is thought to be written by Matthew himself. And a little background on Matthew is that he was a tax collector, which we see in this drawing here. Tax collectors in that day weren't really well liked simply because they often took more money than what the Roman government informed them to, and then they would keep it for themselves. So the Jews didn't really like tax collectors, most people didn't really like them, but we do see that Matthew was called by Jesus, and he did kind of turn his life around. And this takes place in Matthew chapter 9, verses 9 through 13.
Matthew turned from his ways in being a tax collector and started following Jesus as a disciple. Him and the other 11 disciples followed Jesus for 3 years of his ministry, following his teaching, his preaching, and walking in his footsteps.
Matthew was thought to have taken what he had learned from Jesus and recorded it in the book of Matthew, possibly using other sources such as the other Gospels or other outside views, since his Gospel is the longest. So, some of the troubles that we find with Matthew is that there are some differences in between Matthew's writings and then some of the other Gospels. These differences can be explained, and one example of this is the genealogy of Jesus. There are 2 genealogies in the New Testament. One is given by Luke in chapter 3 of his writings, and then one is given by Matthew in chapter 1. They are completely different in some ways and then similar in others. This is because they believe to have been written for both Mary for one and then Joseph for the other. So much like the genealogy and how there's differences in each gospel, there's actually another portion of the narrative that only takes place in Matthew, which does raise some questions. This piece of the narrative takes place in Matthew chapter 27. This is after Jesus was crucified and then when he rose again. So we're going to go ahead and read that scripture and then talk a little bit about it.
So this is Matthew 27, 52 and 53. The bodies of many holy people who had died and were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. So like Madeline said, this is just something odd in Matthew that only occurs in Matthew and not in any of the other Gospels.
Alright, so another difference that we see in Matthew versus the other Gospels is the narrative of Jesus' birth. There are different aspects in each one, such as locations, people, and events. So for locations, Matthew lists places like Bethlehem, Egypt, and Nazareth, whereas Luke lists places like Galilee, Bethlehem, and then Nazareth. So there's some differences, but nothing that's like crazy different. It could just be explained by the difference in time they wrote it, or just their stories not always being 100% factually accurate, as Matthew spent less time looking at the facts than Luke did.
Another thing that's different about the nativity scene is the people. So Matthew just really talks about Joseph, Mary, the Magi. Luke brings in a whole other set of peeps with Mary's family, talking about Elizabeth, her cousin Zachariah, her husband, and John the Baptist, which is Jesus' cousin. And tends to focus on the shepherds, the prophets, things like that.
Thirdly, the differences are the events that take place. Some of this is just like the ordering of events, like what happened first, but then others are just events that one mentions and the other doesn't. Matthew talks a lot about how King Herod hunts down infant Jesus, where Luke looks more at the proclamation of Jesus in the heart of Jerusalem and what that looks like in the time period they were in. So again, there are some differences, and we're going to jump into our next difference. So today we've primarily highlighted the differences between the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke, but there are differences that take place in each one of the Gospels, and this isn't something that we need to necessarily be alarmed about. There are reasons for these differences. Much like you and I all come from different backgrounds and have different perspectives on life, the same thing is true about the writers of the Gospels. Each one of them had their own skill set and things they were gifted in, which would shape the way that they viewed what was going on with Jesus and in the world, and then it would also shape who they wrote to and what the purpose of their scripture was. So Sammy's going to go ahead and tell us a little bit more about those specific differences.
Yeah, so we see in a lot of Matthew that he talks a lot about prophecy, and it's funny because you could say that he geared his gospel towards the Jewish people. So when he talks about prophecy, he talks about Jesus fulfilling prophecy. He says, like, it could just be geared toward the Jewish people to make them realize that Jesus is the Son of God and he is the Messiah. And one thing that would help that idea is that in Mark 2, in the same narrative where Matthew is his calling, when Jesus calls him out of the tax collector's office, we see that Mark calls him Levi. Now, taking you back to the Old Testament, in Genesis, Levi is one of the 12 sons of Jacob, becoming one of the 12 tribes of Israel. And when God gave Israel, the whole nation, a land, he dispersed them all into their own sections, their own tribes. He gave them their own land, except for the tribe of Levi. The tribe of Levi was dispersed among them to be their priests. So this could be a symbolic representation. This could be his Hebrew name, but it could symbolize that he knew more about Jewish culture, religion, and the priesthood than most other people did.
So the reason we wanted to address all of these differences between the Gospels isn't to just completely discredit them. It's more, we wanted to highlight the differences in order to point out that these Gospels are written to different audiences at different times and for different purposes. So some of the differences in scriptures and verses and terminologies can simply be explained because they're writing to different people and they're writing from different perspectives of the writers themselves. They've experienced things differently with Jesus and just in the New Testament time and just the lives they live. So these type of things shapes the way that these people view the world. And because their writings are somewhat different, it gives us different perspectives on the same topics, which can give us a deeper understanding of what actually happened. It doesn't mean that the Bible's wrong or that it's false or that these people are contradicting it themselves. It just means that each of them are human, just like we are, and have different perspectives on the world. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Are you guys still watching? You paying attention?